vengeance, a little Anita will definitely set this party off right. She says she wasn't ready for the world, some new addition, some really look pretend will definitely set this party off right. Yes, we will, yes, we will.
Hello,
Hi, Gregory.
hello, Yolanta.
Hi, B. Hi, Gregory from B.
Hello, hello, B. Welcome. Just wanted to, before we start, I just want to make sure, I want to just do an access check, make sure that Yolanta can hear me, and before we get going.
Good to go. This is so great, Greg. I'm so appreciative of you and Melissa helping with this accessibility. It's already phenomenal. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, B, for joining us. I've heard so much about you. I've been reading more about your work and grateful that you are taking some time to be in conversation, in this conscious conversation with Can't Stop, Won't Stop Consulting. And thank you to Melissa for connecting us and helping also coordinate the accessibility services for today's conversation.
Yes, yes, all the yeses.
Well,
so are we ready to connect live now, or
we are live already?
So? Oh my gosh, we're already live. Okay, hi.
Yes. I will do, if it's okay, I'll just do a quick welcome. Oh. Oh.
Are you able to hear and see me again?
I can hear you.
And B says, yes, I can see Yolanta.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so to start us off, if that's okay, I'll read a little bit of B's biography, and then we'll go into our questions.
Okay, great.
Okay. Well, again, I just want to do a formal welcome and thanks everyone for joining this conscious conversation with Can't Stop, Won't Stop Consulting. Today, I'm excited about our featured guest, a fellow movement mate, and the founder and owner of jooux, B. Gehman. B is a certified sexuality educator With a decade of experience in child development and education fields, Bee is a skilled, compassionate educator, coach, and consultant who has supported individuals across the United States and Canada. Bee is a certified sexuality educator and has more than 10 years of experience in child development, K through 12 education, and sexuality education. As a certified AASECT, that's the American Association of Sexuality Educator, Counselor, and Therapist, sexuality educator, Bee utilizes experiential activities to guide individuals through their ongoing process of being in relationship with themselves and or their loved ones. With a background in family and child studies and psychology and a master's degree in human sexuality education, Bee's approach with people integrates empathy, accountability, and creativity. Bee has worked with thousands of individuals, educating and supporting personal and professional journeys. So I'm super excited to welcome Bee. Thank you again, and really looking forward to this conversation.
Gregory, thank you so very much for such a warm welcome. I'm so excited to be here and so thrilled to connect with all of these folks tonight, with deaf folks, disabled folks. Just really so happy to share space with you, Greg.
Thank you. So if it's okay, I'm going to start with some of the questions that we have.
Please, yes, yes. I will certainly try my best to answer all of these questions, and I always believe that in the spirit of transparency and authenticity, and all people who are watching right now, today is a bit of a rough day for me, so please bear with me. I appreciate your patience and the random things that are flying over my screen. I will try my best, and just am happy to share space with you today. And pardon my little kitty who's trying to join.
Before I ask, I'll just say no worries, Bee. We appreciate the transparency. We will offer grace. We will offer love and care and community. And if there's anything that we can do as we are in conversation, please do not hesitate to ask.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the first question that we like to ask all of our guests is, in the spirit of Ella Baker, who are your people?
Oh, that's such a loaded question. Such a great way to start a conscious conversation, Greg. So who are my people? Really, people who want to be authentic and are working hard to be authentic with themselves. And that sometimes means that you know yourself and that you can't be out in certain places, and you need to honor your truth. And for people who identify as deaf, disabled, deaf-blind folks, hard of hearing, and late deafened people are my people. There's such a special, rare group of folks and people who want to be authentic, really, is what it's about, being authentic with themselves and with others.
Just to build off of that response, which I really resonate with, what do you think is stopping people from being their full authentic selves?
Yeah. There's so many barriers when it comes to learning and understanding what identity is and who they are, and all the opportunities that can allow for folks to grow and maneuver through. And I think that's why I wanted to become an educator, because education is key. Information is power, and we can't be our authentic selves if we don't know things about our own identities, or even feeling something internally and knowing I am something but I don't have the word, or I don't have something that I can connect with, and that's really frustrating. Language access is so important. So in order to access language, we must have access to language and education simultaneously, and vice versa. And there are so many deaf, blind, deaf disabled, hard of hearing, and late deafened people people who do not even have access to information because they are deprived of language, because their families don't sign, nor do they even know how to communicate with them in the written word. I mean, kids come to me and they have these identities. They don't know how to talk about them. They don't know how to talk about sexual identity as a whole person. And my goodness, to feel that, I mean, that's what makes us different from the rest of the creatures that are, I mean, we're human beings. We have opportunities to show who we really are and to be interested in hobbies that connect with our identities, how we express ourselves, our thoughts. People are amazing with their thoughts, amazing with how they express their love for other people. And to be able to express love for self and others, Greg, needs language and needs education.
I really appreciate you naming that, B. And, you know, I feel like that is one place where I feel like there's lots of alignment and connectivity around how are we creating more space and opportunity for people to be their full selves, to live in what I call radical joy, to be able to, and then also be able to support and help others do the same. And an important reminder of like our interdependence, like how much we should be supporting one another and relying on one another and lifting each other up in that way. And so this is such a great grounding for this conversation, because I think that there's all coming into it. I'm feeling a lot of energy and alignment around how some viewpoints of the world and also how we think about and are trying to build community, and how that work starts also with us and how we are showing up and how we support others in that way.
Yes, all the yeses to that. And you mentioned interdependency. It is such a hard lesson. For me, it was so difficult, especially as a deaf person, to try to prove to others that I don't need to rely on them, that I'm okay, I am independent. And I grew up with this experience of relying on hearing people for my communication and requiring it to the point where I had to say, no, I am my own autonomous, independent self. And that mentality of independence is good. And two things can be true. It's also harmful. So as adults, we think, oh shit, I have to depend on others to be healthy. And like, crap, I have to relearn all the things that I learned to be true to make this world better.
Yeah. Your response kind of leads me to my next question that I want to ask you, which is another question that we ask all of our guests. And this question is, when was the last time you felt brave?
The last time I felt brave. Oh my God, Greg. Every day. Every day. Every day when I step foot into work and I am the one deaf person among a sea of hearing people, I have an awesome team of folks and I am their supervisor. So sometimes I'm required to be brave, to have difficult conversations and to talk about what folks need. And I have to show up as me, as a deaf person in hearing-centered space. And that, you know, one little piece of me is always brave. But when it comes to major bravery, that's when I decided to leave toxic relationship last year. Actually, literally 1 year ago today. So that was the major bravery that I can share with you, is when I left. And so little decisions and big decisions allow for my bravery to shine. So when I decided to be authentic with myself.
Well, thank you for being so vulnerable. I am inspired by your bravery, and I think it is a reminder for me the importance of me to continue to be an advocate and champion of disability justice to think about access and to challenge folks who don't think about it, who have the privilege of not necessarily having to think about it in that way all the time, to kind of be that person to say, as an ally, as a co-conspirator, we have to do better. And we can't rely on folks with disabilities to be the people who are the only ones who are reminding folks just how ableist our society is. And so I just want you to know you have my commitment and my ongoing partnership, co-conspiratorship to figure out how we free ourselves from these ableist systems and find more ways to increase access and to not always feel like it has to be centered around hearing spaces or things of that nature. That it takes a lot too to kind of just be able to share your story with people and to have to remind people that these are things that you go through and that we go through, but not everyone is always willing to share. And so I also just want to show appreciation for that. And may you being so vulnerable and open encourage others to do so as well in an effort to offer more healing, to have more healing, and so that we could also be in better relationship with ourselves and each other.
Yes, thank you, Greg, for saying that.
So I know I read your bio, or shared a little bit of your bio in terms of the kind of work that you've done. And I know you kind of alluded to it a little bit in some of your response to the first couple of questions, but what actually got you started in sexuality, in becoming a certified sexuality educator, and what motivates you to continue to do this work, which I imagine continues to add many layers and nuances and maybe challenges, especially in the political moment that we are in.
Definitely. To answer the first part of the question is how I got into this field is really my own personal experiences, Greg. I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And from the age of 12 to the age of 19, I had ongoing sexual traumas. And with those experiences, I experienced trauma from residential schools for the deaf. And the irony is that I went to a deaf school and I imagined that everybody could sign, everybody had access, and we all shared a common language. So when the trauma happened, I was gobsmacked that I didn't have any resources. I didn't have anyone to go to. I didn't have help, and I was left feeling like it was my fault. So I went back home to my hearing family, and let me also be honest in sharing that I'm one of the lucky ones. I had access to language at home. My family does sign. They're not the best signers in the world, but I had access. And so imagine that I didn't have that at my school where I was every day. And my family wouldn't talk about it. They wouldn't talk about it with me, even though that's the one place I had access to language. I was raised with a strong religious background, and I could not understand, I couldn't fathom that my family wouldn't talk about it. And I felt like I just couldn't have healthy relationships, a healthy view of my body, of my experiences, of what pleasure meant. And I always thought that I would. So over time, when I went through college and I was still witnessing a lack of resources for deaf folks, I started to teach at the Texas School for the Deaf as a child development specialist. And I thought to myself, my goodness, sex education is non-existent for deaf folks. And it really, everything was designed for hearing folks and sort of retrofit, not only hearing folks, but straight, cisgender, white folks. And so I really started unpacking what that meant. And at that time, I was going through my own sexual healing, and I was reading a lot of books about sexuality. And at that time, I look back more than 10 years ago, I couldn't even look at my vagina. I couldn't look at, I was so disgusted about a part that was my own body. I couldn't look at my own body. I was so ashamed. And I forced myself to read a variety of books about people's experiences, about vaginas, about bodies. I looked at pictures of vaginas to normalize what it was supposed to look like. Oh, they all come in different shapes and sizes. And I had no idea until the point where I finally, I mean, I don't think I'm healed. Let me just say, it's not a past tense word. I'm still in the process of healing, but I felt more so healed and started talking with people, and they started sharing their sexual traumas. And I thought to myself, this has to stop. This has to stop. The sexual trauma needs to stop, and the secrecy around sexual trauma and the inability to access a place of healing. So I decided to do something about it. And I apologize that that took a little bit of a roundabout turn rather than more direct, but that's really what happened with me.
No need to apologize. I think the what motivates us to do the work that we do is so critical. And I find that especially when it is so personal, related to past experiences, past traumas, that I think it's particularly important for folks to know that context, because I think it provides a different context to who we are, the work that we do. And so I know I appreciated it, and I'm taking in just how, unfortunately, like how we have to respond, like when there aren't those resources, when there aren't services or supports that we can go to. For me is part of, when we respond and have to develop and create those things for folks, it means that we are doing this while also trying to figure out how we provide that support for ourselves. So it's like an important balance of how, as I'm building this thing or that other folks can leverage and utilize, how do I make sure I'm also a resource and have what I need, even though it's based in that experience. So I find that sometimes makes it even more challenging or adds extra layers to the work that we do sometimes. I mean, sometimes people don't understand that. So I think you sharing that story and talking about that is an important context for people to be like, all right, this is part of B's story, but also part of why B does what they do.
Yes. And that balance that you mentioned of the work that we're doing plus the self-care is so tough. And it's not just me, because I happen to work in this field, that I had to take care of myself and my own sexual identity, but really it happens for everyone. Because really, when we talk about sexuality, it is a part of who we are as a whole, our everyday identity, how we show up, how we connect or don't connect with people. And if we don't feel safe in a particular place, it's not just about teaching, but it's really about any work that we do. Any identity is going to be affected. You can't feel safe to be yourself if you don't have that space. So it's so critical for a workspace, whether it be school or camp or wherever we spend our 8 hours a day, for that space or at home to be safe with the people and to be able to allow for folks to be themselves, to heal so that they can thrive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it makes me even more grateful for, the organization that you are building. As, I'm curious if you can reflect, what has been the experience of founding your organization, going into entrepreneurship, and do you have any particularly proud moments that you want to share with folks that you've had along the way?
I'm laughing. Yes, jooux is just new as of 1 year ago. We just celebrated our 1 year birthday, and what a journey it has been. I'm still figuring it out, and I really don't know a damn thing, Greg. I don't know anything. I think my proud moments are really when I could pull in people on my team. Those are my proudest moments. It's so cool to see this ability to create a workspace where folks can show up as their full selves. And it really means so much, because for this past year, I have thought so much about what types of environments I want to establish for folks to start their work at jooux. And I have experienced toxic work environments in the past, and that's the last thing I want to share with folks while they're at jooux. I want the exact opposite. And the ability to see my team have that energy, that motivation, that interconnectedness, the ability to share ideas is beyond amazing. But we're still such a small entity. There's only the three of us right now. And it's not my full-time job. I also work at the Family Tree Clinic as a full-time staff. So jooux is small and mighty, and my hope is that it will grow on its own and that I can become a full-time employee at jooux and provide more services for deaf, deaf-blind, deaf-disabled, hard of hearing, and like deaf people. It's so much to do, really. Honestly, there's still so much to do.
Well, making it 1 year is definitely worth celebrating. Congratulations, and wishing you many more years of success.
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I wanted to, one thing that I wanted to ask you was around just the topic of sex. I know we've been in conversation about sex and sexuality, but sometimes it could be a sensitive or an uncomfortable topic for people to engage in. So what is your approach in creating a safe and welcoming and inviting space for people to feel like they could engage with you or engage with others around sex and sexuality?
I tell people it's okay to feel awkward. If you giggle, if you're uncomfortable, it's absolutely okay. I'll follow their lead. I think it's so important to let folks build their comfort at their pace, and especially because it takes being uncomfortable to get to comfort. And to allow for what type of presence that I bring is so important. It's a judgment-free space. There are no means of better or less than when I walk into this space, or knowing more or less than. When I work with students, I let them know that I am not the expert. I let them know that they are the experts. They are the experts about their own journey, and that they know what is best for them. What I can do is provide them with resources and information, and they can take and glean what fits best for who they are. And I think that's a bit about sharing that they are the expert and they're okay, Greg. Because a lot of times just folks don't know that they're just okay. So it opens a space for them where they can take charge of their sexuality, their journey, their experience of learning.
I wish that I had access to those kinds of spaces a lot younger. But I also appreciate the humility and like part of the willingness to kind of also affirm other folks and reminding them, because I think in a world that doesn't necessarily always affirm that you are the expert, or you are the decision maker, you have the agency for your body and for what you do with your life, I think that is so affirming. My hope is that more people will be able to have access to that kind of support and the resource to be able to feel like they can be the expert and have that agency over their bodies and things that happen with their bodies and to their bodies. So thank you for sharing that and for kind of reminding us, like, these are the kinds of ways we should be approaching these conversations, even if they may seem uncomfortable or whatnot, that if we normalize actually talking about it at younger ages and give folks the resources to be able to engage in these kinds of conversations, then it would better prepare them as they age and as they go into adulthood.
Yes. And when it comes to creating space, when I meet folks, there are sometimes things they want to learn, different topics that they're curious about. And I'm all okay with those topics. Let's say, for example, we're going to talk about 5 different things. Let's know what you want to start with first, because if you want to start with this particular list, but you're not ready for that subject matter, I offer a significant amount of fluidity in my instruction,
Mhm.
because our brains take in information very differently than our hearts, very differently than our bodies, and differently than our souls. So
Mhm.
these topics, I allow for that fluidity so that we can, as I mentioned before, be authentic with ourselves and also be authentic with our learning processes. Because we're so used to our current academic system in the United States, like bing, 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 you got to be done, get all the answers right, and it's a one-shot deal. That's it. And our
Mhm.
brains are not wired for that. Certainly we can consume information, but in order for our body to catch up with that and to heal, because sometimes the information we learn is very triggering for our bodies and it puts us in a state of disbelief. And also, we don't end up remembering what we learned because we're trying to deal with the triggers of the physicality and what has happened to our body because we've had trauma in our life or traumas in our other lives that we don't even know about.
Yeah. Yeah. As you were reflecting, it reminded me I used to work at an education organization, and we talked about how we have to be lifelong students, that there is always going to be something that we can learn. And frankly, as I've continued in life, there's also many things that we have to unlearn. But being able to have the humility to know that, to say, look, there is something I can learn from every person that I meet. There's even something that I may have learned or known to be true for so long that I could change my mind about, and that is okay. And that is actually, for me, that's how I'm reacting or responding to this concept of fluidity. Is like, and because we understood it one way, we may shift it based on an experience or based on what we learned or something that we got from another interaction or engagement. And so I am. I hope that people can continue to have that level of humility, because I think we may miss out on opportunities or miss out on certain things, because if we think we know everything, then we kind of close off, like either in interactions or engagements with folks. And so um, yeah, when I appreciate that kind of framing, and I think let this be an invitation for folks to feel like, like be open minded, have an open heart, open soul, and you'll be surprised the kinds of things that you're able to get when you're in that kind of posture.
Yes. Yes, exactly that, Greg. Exactly that. And I am just in awe at how some people are so set in what their identity is, what they were told, what their favorite color is, that it's never changed, that they've eaten the same thing. I always wonder these things and
Mm-hmm.
how our tastes change, whether it's our taste in food or clothing. Maybe we were very fine with, changing certain things except for our identity. Why is it that so many people are against changing identity? You change your clothes every day, you change your style, and imagine that you can recharge yourself as a human on this cyclical basis. Our taste buds change, our hair is constantly changing. We as humans are changing in all sorts of ways, and I'm always taken aback at the fact that people aren't okay with their identities changing. That's such a fascinating topic.
Mm. Ooh, yeah. I sometimes do. This is a reminder for me to kind of think about that. Like, that also is related to our identities changing or even shifting, or even our understanding of what our identity is and how we are living into it, and how that informs our everyday decisions. So, something to continue to kind of think about and reflect on some more. So, thank you for even offering so many things for me that I'm going to really hold and reflect more on even after our conversation.
So grateful.
Mm,
I'm just genuinely thrilled to share space with you. And it's a long conversation that I hope will continue.
absolutely. Um, if it's okay, I would love to shift and ask you some other questions. Um,
Sure, sure.
okay, so in April, as you may know, April is also Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And so I think it's I'm curious if, what are ways in which you recognize or help people use this moment or month to kind of think about sexual assault, and how do you navigate conversations around that, and does that feel different, or and how do you support folks who maybe have experienced assault and are trying to figure out ways to heal and respond in ways that are healthy as possible?
That's a great question. And it's interesting because this year has been a little bit different from years past. I find myself more pensive and how I'm teaching sex education and how my work can change people in terms of how they treat others in relationships, just in general, in any relationships. So yes, survivors need support and healing, and simultaneously there is an opportunity for people who cause harm to be educated. And how do we stop the harm that's being caused? How can we present information to them so they can hold accountability while simultaneously having the space to heal as well? I think that's integral, because harm needs to stop being caused and healing needs to happen. So that's such a challenge, and I'm often challenged when folks who cause harm don't have those resources because of the things I mentioned before. They didn't have language, they didn't have access, they didn't have resources. So how do you hold space in both groups, if you will, especially in the deaf communities and in other marginalized communities, for folks who have experienced harm, whether it's sexual harm or sexual assault? Oftentimes people who are harmed cause more harm. And how do you stop that cycle? And I certainly don't have a direct answer as to what I'm doing this month, but I'm considering a shift and having conversations that really share an informed lens where we expect to treat each other with boundaries, and it's okay to create boundaries. And people learn that no means no, and it's okay that somebody says no. It's not taking it personally. And if you do, okay, you take it personally, and let's unpack that a bit. Say, well, that's something that I need to work on. Why am I having that visceral reaction? Whatever you choose to connect or someone you're choosing to pursue is not working. So how do I take care of myself without harming others? If that made any sense.
Oh yeah, it makes sense. And I guess that's also part of what I'm trying to also reflect on too is, while folks recognize April as Sexual Assault Awareness Month, how do we create space not only for survivors and those who've experienced harm, but also how do we create space for those who cause harm? Because to your point, hurt people, and until they get the resources and support they need, they will likely, or they will be in a position to continue doing that to other people. And I think for me it's just also important just to name that, and even if it means having to have people think okay, well, what are ways that I could maybe resource organizations who do this work, or maybe resource organizations that maybe specialize or is focused in particular communities. I think that it's worth and it's important interrogation, and to also wonder there may be folks who are survivors who may have experienced harm that maybe are family members, are friends, are coworkers, but they haven't had the space or the opportunity or maybe the safety to be able to share that and talk about that. And how do we also understand or question the conditions that we create for folks to be able to talk about that, whether it's they experience harm or even cause harm. Because I think that there's a level of shame or a level of something that causes people not to even name that, so they can even know or even name that they need the help to be able to break that cycle or to get the healing that they need so that they're not inflicting harm on others. And so there's a nuanced conversation here that I'm hoping that we can normalize so that it creates space for all who are impacted, whether you are someone who is a survivor and has felt harm or harm's been inflicted upon, or you're someone who's inflicted it or caused harm, or maybe even witnessed it or know somebody who has. I feel like between those categories, that's a much broader set of people than we care to admit sometimes or are open about. And so how are we creating more environments or conditions so that we could have this conversation in April, yes, but all year long?
Yes, agreed 1000%. And how do we create that? I don't have the answer for that.
And you know, maybe it's just something that at least I see in your work, that you're creating space for more folks earlier on in their lives to be better equipped to have those conversations. And so how do we, maybe it's maybe what I'm also asking is like, I am inspired by this work. How can I and more folks we can encourage more folks to support jooux? How can we support more folks like you who are leading this work and providing these resources so that we can normalize more of these conversations in more communities and more homes and more workplaces all around. And of course, I'm not trying to have the burden for you to figure it out, but I think you have created a space and opportunity for folks to have these conversations. And how can we model or replicate that so that other folks in other communities can also have these conversations as well?
Yes. When it comes to having these conversations, I also connect with the importance of understanding that boundaries are different for each person. I'm trying to look for this word. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't have a word for it, so bear with me. I've often seen folks who cause harm and don't realize they cause harm because they don't have words for it, or their mental health doesn't allow for them to see it because they haven't had any self-care. So experiencing anxiety and depression is in the way of not acknowledging or recognizing that they have caused harm. So it is unintentional. And how do we have conversations about that? How can we care for each other when we are also struggling ourselves with our own mental health and struggling with how we can set boundaries for ourselves and with other people? How do we do that?
Yeah, that's something that comes up actually more often than I am in different spaces that I'm in, of saying like, some folks talk about it like, well, no matter what your intent was, there was a particular impact that it had, and whether it was intentional or not, it still had that impact. And so how do we even create the conditions for folks to be able to comfortably communicate that or to name those things, and for people who, even if it was unintentional, can receive that feedback to say, oh, I apologize, I'm sorry, that wasn't my intention, but I take ownership and accountability for the harm or the hurt that I've caused you. And let's talk about it. Like, what was it that I did in particular? Was it what moment or what? And for them to also be able to use it as a learning opportunity and kind of welcome it as an interrogation around, okay, how could I take ownership and shift behavior versus let's act like it didn't happen, let's not talk about it, and then just make assumptions about like how we actually should deal with it, you know? So I think it's an important conversation, and how I at least question, like, do we have these conditions to even be able to give this kind of feedback or to ask those kinds of questions, or for us to take ownership of the things that we do, whether or not they were intentional to other people? If it's okay, I want to ask another set of questions around, thinking about the intersections of sex, deaf and LGBTQ2IA plus communities, you know, as you're doing this work to elevate access to sexual wellness in deaf LGBTQ2IA communities, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges or some of the things that you feel like still need to be resolved as it relates to like the intersections of those communities?
Space to connect with other people who have a shared identity in person. Right now, the deaf communities are so small and simultaneously so big that there are different pockets of folks all over the world who identify as deaf and part of the LGBTQIA plus communities and are isolated. And it oftentimes happens where a person who identifies as deaf and queer feels as though there are either little or no other individuals who identify as they do. And so there is a lack of connection. And when they want to connect with people, it's difficult because while we do have virtual means, I mean, COVID has just been so treacherous on so many of us. And the isolation that happened because of quarantine limited even more spaces for folks and simultaneously offered a virtual space to share with other individuals, which has then led to this craving of people to be in space physically with each other. Because as a person who is deaf and queer, identifying in small town Iowa as the only person and knows that there are deaf queer people in small town Ohio, what does that mean? Does that mean they have to uproot and move to a community that will be welcoming of them? Or especially if there are Black, Indigenous, people of color who are deaf and also LGBTQIA, most of the spaces availed to deaf folks are predominantly white. They don't allow for spaces that LGBTQAI plus individuals who are Black, Indigenous, people of color to thrive. And so there's such a craving for that connectivity in person.
Yeah, I've that resonates so much. I think I am also an extrovert myself. I'm an extrovert. I thrive off of being around other people, even if we're not necessarily in direct communication. Just like being present around others gives me a sense of like community and gives me energy to kind of stay motivated. So that I definitely feel that and understand kind of how, especially in this pandemic, how people are yearning for more of that kind of connectivity. What is a hope that you have in terms of, or as we try to raise the vibration of the collective?
Oh my gosh, I've got hopes for days, Greg. Do you mean specific to deaf queer folks in raising the collective, or how specific shall we get?
I guess I'm curious for as broad or as specific. Maybe you can start with deaf queer folks, and then if there's other hopes, I feel like this could be a good opportunity to try to inspire folks with some of the hopes you have for deaf queer folks and more broadly.
I think it's really schools. I really, really, really hope that all schools for the deaf become affirming spaces for deaf queer youth. All schools. And I don't mean just the ones that have hubs of deaf communities, like in Texas or in Fremont or in Framingham, Massachusetts. I feel like I want it to be a space where deaf, queer folks don't have to hide themselves, and they are appreciated and seen by teachers, and they have role models who are like them in dorm staff, in education staff, and a lot of these folks are away from home because they are residential schools. So Monday through Friday, you live in a dorm. That's a lot. That's a lot of space and time. And if your school doesn't affirm you as a deaf, queer youth and has no space for that affirmation, that identity development is delayed till so much later in life, sometimes college and past. A majority of your college years, you know, I'm a perfect example, were really about figuring out what my identity was. I spent so much time about who, what, where I just wanted to focus about, like, you know, what kind of job I want to do, what do I want to pursue, what do I want to give back. But I was so intent on figuring out my identity because I didn't have all of these resources that it was graduation and I was still working on what I want to do. So identity development is so delayed for deaf queer folks because of that lack of experience and those spaces. And if you're in a family that doesn't use sign language and you're trying to navigate life without access to language, then, you know, we think about elementary things like hobbies, conversations, reading, what do you like to do, what motivates you. If you can't even have those opportunities within your own family, and then you're getting into elementary school, and then you're getting into middle school and into high school, maybe you finally have access to someone, or maybe not even till college, then you're already 12 years delayed in that figuring out of your identity. So if we could start in the youngest of school spaces is my hope.
Thank you. That leads me to the next question that I'm going to add in here, because I'm in a deep reflective state right now. And you talked about kind of these experiences we had when you were younger. And it makes me wonder, now that you've kind of have gone through life, started a new organization, had the experiences that you've had, if you look back and can imagine the younger Bee, is there anything that you would tell the younger Bee now that you've kind of had the experiences that you've had?
Don't be afraid to shine.
Don't be afraid to shine. Beautiful. Wow, I'm really touched. I want to just say thank you so much for your vulnerability, your openness, the care that I literally could feel through this Instagram live screen. And I really just appreciate kind of this conversation and sharing space with you. Before we close out, I would love to just see an invitation. Are there campaigns or projects that you want to lift up? And if people want to support you and the work you do, can you share with me and others how we can do so? Because I want to make sure that we create a little space for that as well.
Oh, Greg, I feel the same. For today, I am figuring out how to keep jooux sustainable. That's where I am today. And if you know of any fantastic grants you can share with me, if you can help jooux stay alive and allow for us to create accessible services that are free, I am open to all of those suggestions.
Okay. Well, I will commit on behalf of Can't Stop, Won't Stop Consulting. We will provide some amount of a donation. So we'll circle back if we want to contribute and support. Thank you for your time. And also just seriously, you're just learning more about what you all do has been such an inspiration. And so would love to stay in contact to figure out how we can also partner moving forward as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Greg. Yes, thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. I'm so touched beyond signs. I can't tell you. And you have the warmest, kindest heart, and I hope to share the same with you. And honestly, one thing before we close, I was nervous about having a conversation with a hearing person, and you have made this a wonderful experience, and this means more to me than you'll ever know.
Well, I want to just lift up Melissa because Melissa has been such an important influence and person in my life to understand the importance of access. It's to a point now where
Yes.
I will not speak at events unless I know they're going to have an interpreter. And I'm willing to leverage the different spaces that I'm in to really put and encourage folks to be more proactive. So it is my hope that you will feel the love, that maybe we, and that we create space for more folks to feel like they can be engaged in conversation. And so thank you for taking the risk and being so open. And for folks who are following along or watching, please follow B, follow the Jooux Center, make a donation, support the work of B and the Jooux Center. And we look forward to staying in touch, B. And thank you, Yolanta and Melissa, for the accessibility services coordination.
Thank you, Greg. Take care, everybody. Oh, such big virtual hugs from me to you, with consent, of course.
Thank you.
Bye,
Take care,
folks.
everyone.